It's time for the inaugural AFC North Roundtable, a sit down with the families, as though it was organized Barzini or I don't know who else. Going left to right, let's say hello to everybody representing the two orange hatted teams from the state of Ohio. First, from Awful, announcing it's our old pal. He's our Browns rep today, Ben Axelrod. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. I'm trying to think of which mafia boss being the Browns representative here would be, and none of them are good.
No, I was going to say the worst one. Whichever one you rank as the worst, that's which family you would be representing. Next, from the southwestern portion of Ohio, from Bengals on the brain, Bengals rep. Look how classy I am. I didn't even call him the Bungles. Bengals rep Joe Goodberry. How are you, man? And nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. I'm doing great. I'm doing better than the team is doing. And yeah, the Bungles is a bit offensive over here, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, okay. I'll try to avoid it. No promises though. Licking his wounds after another tough one from the Birdies. Joe Burrow did his best. The defense did not. And from Charm City, my oldest pal here in this conversation, the host of Glenn Clark Radio. Poor guy's a Birdies rep, Ravens rep. Glenn Clark, how are you, fella?
All of a sudden, you guys find a quarterback that can put like 2 feet together, and I hear from you again. Now, all of a sudden, Dave wants to talk again. He wants to get back at it. Oh, I'm happy to have the chat, pal. It's good to see you, my friend.
Well, your guy, Lamar Jackson, doesn't tend to look like what we expect from Lamar Jackson when he faces off against Mike Tomlin's defense, wearing that black and gold. We'll dig in on.
Yeah, we'll have at it. We'll have at it. Maybe somebody can catch a football.
Okay, 2024 climate check, a quick look around the AFC North neighborhood. And let's start with this one. I floated this one out to the audience in advance to see where they came down. Pretty straightforward question. Who's winning the division this year? 65.7% of responders say the Ravens are going to do it. That in front of the big game in Pittsburgh, PA this weekend. Joe, I'm going to go around the wheel here. How say you? Who's taking this one ultimately?
I'm also going with the Ravens. I tend to go who's got the best quarterback, who's got the best offense. Now we're talking AFC North, so defense does come into play. I mean, that's why the Bengals are a 4-6 team right now, right? So it doesn't always go that way. It doesn't always lean towards the quarterback, but Lamar is playing at an MVP level yet again, maybe for the third time. It may go that way. I think this game obviously going to answer some questions and maybe give them a slight lead if they can pull away with this one this weekend. But that's the way I tend to go. And then when comparing the two teams, offense definitely leans towards Baltimore.
I mean, Lamar Jackson, it's not hyperbole to say that if he keeps up this pace for the rest of the season, I think it ranks in the top 5 greatest quarterback seasons in the Super Bowl era. And I know that's a big statement, but he really is playing on an entirely different level, even though based on what he's already established himself to be. I think he's reached a higher plane now. Ben, how say you?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think entering this season, there were so many questions about the AFC North. And to me, the Ravens are just one of those teams. As long as Lamar Jackson's healthy, you can pencil them in for 10 or 11 wins. And that's typically enough to win the division. I think you look at all the other rosters in the AFC North, even at the start of the season, obviously the Browns had a ton of question marks. The Bengals had a lot of question marks. The Steelers, you had question marks at quarterback. And even though some of those have gone positively for those teams, I think the Ravens just top to bottom are the best 53-man roster, and they have the best player in the division who happens to play the most important position. So I thought Ravens entering the season, and I haven't seen anything to this point in the year that's made me think otherwise.
Deja vu, Glenn Clark. If we jumped into the time machine and bounced back exactly 1 year, the conversation is very similar to the one that's rolling right now, which is, can Lamar finally get past the Chiefs, or can Josh Allen do it? Spoiler alert, I have my doubts, and it's not because of Lamar or anybody on the offensive side of things. It's that defense. For all the songs being sung, boy, they are really not doing great in fourth quarters trying to stop other teams from throwing over their heads. How say you? Who's getting this division?
Yeah, Dave, the pass defense is brutal, right? It's awful, and it's sort of stunning how bad it is. It's not just that Mike McDonald left for Seattle. They lost a couple other important position coaches. We've seen what Denard Wilson has done with Tennessee's defense. But we still didn't expect it to be this bad. Look, I am at a point where I think the Lamar Jackson thing is almost impervious to the defense. Look, they can't win every game. They lost to the Browns a couple weeks ago, but it's not because of Lamar Jackson. It's because of that pass defense. Lamar Jackson can do this whatever defense is put in front of him. The Bengals held him in check for the better part of 3 quarters on Thursday night. And then he was Lamar Jackson again. And when that's the dude, when it all comes down to that, and when even if the Bengals had gotten that 2-point conversion at the end of the game, you're going to give Lamar Jackson in 39 seconds and 2 timeouts to go the other way. Now, the Ravens kicking situation is a different conversation, but I think the Ravens would have won that game anyway, even if they had given up the 2-point conversion, because that's where Lamar Jackson is. So, yeah, I get it. You're going to remind me that Lamar Jackson has never played well in a win over the Steelers, and that is true. He's played well against them. He's beaten them. He's never done both things. It's more anomaly than anything else, but we'll talk about it. I still think ultimately the team that has Lamar Jackson has to be the team to beat. So, yeah, the Ravens.
I mean, the sad irony, the good news is for Ravens fans is that over the last decade, if you had a league average kicker instead of Justin Tucker, I wonder how relevant you would have been in some seasons if you would have been playoff bound and all of that. So the irony of him being the only guy in the league who can't make 50-plus yarders anymore is kind of sad. Also sad, the Bengals' ability to ever get out of the gate in September with success. Very strange stuff to try and overcome that. Now, though, people are kind of picking them because that 7 seed looks wide open. A real strong top 6 in the AFC, but who knows who's going to get that 7th? Will it be the Bengals? 47% of people who responded here say yes, they will. 38% say it'll be the Broncos. Not much faith in the Dolphins. I think I'm leaning in that direction because the Ravens still have a couple of games against Pittsburgh upcoming here. But for now, let's ask Ben, how say you? Bengals making it to January or no?
I don't see it. I just don't think this team has been consistent enough throughout this season. I think that the slow start coming out the gates in September is going to come back and bite them. I'm going to sound like a traitor here. I'd love to see it. I'm a Central Ohio guy. I covered Joe Burrow at Ohio State. Jamar Chase might be my favorite player in the league who doesn't play for the Browns, but I just don't see it. I don't think I've seen that consistency from them. And it just feels like in a lot of ways, a kind of year from hell when you look at that slow start and the way that it could come back to bite them here down the home stretch.
Couple delightful shootouts between Cincy and Baltimore so far, especially if you were on the Ravens side of things. Glenn Clark, do you think the Bengals overcome those 2 losses and get into the postseason?
Yeah, I do. I can never write off the Bengals, man. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase are too good. I do think Miami's a factor, and seeing them sort of start to get things together, but those 2 dudes are just too capable. And if T. Higgins gets back out on the field, look, their defense is bad too. There's no doubt. And the offensive line has issues. And, Joe can speak more to it. It just seems like sort of the vibes are off in Cincinnati. And there's been that whole thing with Jermaine Burton was really strange. And Joe Burrow scowling on the sideline. But even after that, they go, toe to toe with the Ravens on a Thursday night on the road and, come really close to beating them. So, yeah, I cannot write off the Bengals. Like, Joe Burrow is too freaking good to be dismissive of. And I always, like has been said before, default to the best quarterbacks.
All right, Joe, that now you've heard from your rivals. How say you? Is your team destined for glory?
I don't know if they're destined for anything to me other than disappointing us, but I do doing the simulations and going on playoff predictor machines and seeing what it looks like. The conversation is it the Colts, Bengals, maybe Dolphins and Broncos for that last spot. So who do you really trust to play well in the rest of November and December? Are you taking a rookie quarterback in the Broncos? Maybe they might be the best team of all those. But again, rookie quarterback. Are you taking the Dolphins that tend to get worse as the season goes? We'll see if that carries because Tua missed so much time. Maybe the offense still has some tricks left in the bag that they haven't used yet to keep them fresh long enough. And then you have the Bengals. I think the Colts are a mess, and I'm not sure if they're going to even be there. We'll see if they may have the easiest schedule of the group. But I think the Bengals are still playing well enough that, remember, the Chiefs week 2, that goes down to a final play, 4th and 16. They get a defensive pass interference call. The Chiefs kick a field goal right after. They missed the field goal, an extra point off a bad hold against the Ravens. Then the Ravens game we just saw the other night could have went either way. And, a lot of different plays could go either way. That's how football is. But Are they going to play better throughout the second half of the year? The schedule is what it is. They have the Broncos and they have the Chargers. Can you handle those two games? It starts this week and we'll have the Broncos week 17. But those are the two teams really in front of you. Chargers may already have a playoff spot, but still, you beat that Broncos in week 17. That's how they get in. And we could be asking this question for another 5 weeks until we get there.
It's funny, one of the looming figures of this division, this millennium, is Joe Flacco. And that's a great what if. The Browns, they may have had confidence in him, but they had to purge him because it would have hurt the $230 million QB's feelings too much to keep him around. And so now Joe Flacco may play a big hand on whether or not Cincy gets into the playoffs or if it's the Colts. By the way, the Steelers should get there if they could just go 3-3 over their 6 games in the division, because that gets them to 10 wins, and 10 wins should certainly be good enough to do that. Next up, we talk about Joe Flacco. Maybe he'll be the quarterback in Cleveland next year. Unlikely, though. Who will be the quarterback? I asked the audience. Amazing. A tie. 2 answers, both landing at 34.6%. They say either a draft pick, a current student athlete, or a free agent. Who knows? Maybe it'll be Justin Fields. 25% say Deshaun Watson. Glenn Clark, how say you?
I can't fathom them going back to look, man, this is the Browns, and I'm not trying to pile on, Ben, but like God knows what that organization is capable of doing. Although I do have great respect for Andrew Berry, who I was once his I was once his supervisor at a Best Buy 25 years ago. That's a true story. Look, I cannot fathom them turning to Deshaun Watson as their starter. And I get it's even more awkward. Like, how do you have a guy getting paid that much money sitting there and paying him and not playing him? But I just can't fathom it. It feels like it has to be a draft pick to continue to go that route. I actually am, Dave, like a bit of a Justin Fields truther. Like, I really think that guy is more talented than
Me
people.
too.
I like him a lot. And I wouldn't, if I were the Browns, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I think they have to give something for that fan base to buy into. And so I do think it'll end up being a draft pick. And I do think they're better off. I think like ultimately they could look back and really rue the fact that Jameis Winston beat the Baltimore Ravens a couple of weeks ago, because it might impact who's available to him.
So long story short, Deshaun Watson, not a best buy.
Yeah, there you go. Very well done. Correct. Not a best buy, perhaps the worst buy in the history of football. Yeah.
Well, an ironic turn for someone who learned at your knee when you were supervising that store. Joe, how say you? What are the Browns going to do this offseason to fix the QB spot or anything at all?
I don't think they fix it this offseason. I think it is a situation where they're probably going to have to field the CFL team for one season, get the cap right, get everything, let all the dead money hit 1 year and let it roll and tank a year and get it right for the following season. So maybe it's a bridge quarterback. You mentioned Flacco. Maybe that is how Justin Fields. Maybe that's why that makes sense. Maybe they go around the entire AFC North gambit and bring Andy Dalton for that role. But whatever it is, I think that we're looking at a bridge season and then they try to get right afterwards.
Yeah, it is about time for Andy to land back in this division, right? How say you, Ben?
Yeah, for one, I'm going to say I'm not surprised that Andrew Berry was a member of the Geek Squad, just knowing how hard the Browns lean into their analytics. But 2, I think it's going to be a draft pick. 1, because they're going to have the opportunity to do it. I mean, you look at the way this season's shaken out. They're sitting at 2-7 with a pretty tough schedule ahead. They're going to have a top 5 pick. And if you have a top 5 pick, you're going to have an opportunity, I think, to take either Shedeur Sanders or probably more likely someone like a Cam Ward. And then the other thing about this is that they're in such cap hell right now when it comes to that Deshaun Watson salary cap hit, that really the only way for them to get out of this and to bridge some sort of a gap is to hit on a rookie quarterback and just pretend like he's the one you're paying $45 million a year for the next 2 years, because the way they've restructured his contract, I think what Joe said makes sense. And then you look ahead and, hey, maybe you get Arch Manning in here. He has a connection with the Haslam family. But the way they've restructured this contract, they're going to feel this for not just next year, but for years to come. So I think if you can hit on a top pick and just pretend like he's the one you're paying Deshaun Watson's contract, that's really the only way I think you can get out of this and kind of bridge that gap to whatever the next era of Browns football looks like without having to do another total teardown like they did in 2016 and 2017.
Yeah, the model, I guess, is for the kids out there. Russell Wilson was not always a Steeler. He used to be on the Seahawks, and that was sort of the model that they followed way back when. They signed Matt Flynn for way too much money, but they had the rookie Russell Wilson right behind him. So it all shook out in the end. Now, on to an auspicious week 11. It's always grand when the Ravens and the Steelers play. We'll shelve that one for a second here. The Browns are going down to NOLA. Let's go around the wheel here. And Joe, I'll start with you. Do you think the Browns have anything left to offer the remainder of this season? NOLA, obviously, in a tough spot themselves right now.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the Saints are hungrier or show a little more spunk than the Browns do. It seemed like as soon as that first game, they had the dead cat bounce when the Browns finally got had to move on from Deshaun Watson and go with Jameis Winston. But afterwards, it looked like what you expected. Like the team doesn't look good. They don't have good quarterback play. The offense is not what it used to be, especially with the offensive line. Losing Bill Callahan, it's just not the same. And I think I'm going to go with the Saints in this game. They just, even last week, I thought, Derek Carr, hey, there's a little something back there. They look like what we thought earlier in the season. How long will that last? I'm going to take the Saints in this one.
It's not just Jameis's return there, but also it's never clear to me who gets who day. What is the Bengals one versus the Saints? But that's what this is a battle for, right? What do the Bengals fans say?
Who started it first? Who day or who dat?
Who day and who dat? And
yeah, the Saints are who dat. The Bengals are who dat.
Okay, you're who day. Okay. All right. You took the Browns helmets and then you took the Saints chant. All right.
There's conflicting stories on when that started.
Okay. Ben, how say you? You can be quick on this one. I don't want it to be painful for you.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick the Browns for another game the rest of the season. I think that, they are an analytics team, so they know that their best way out of this is to lose as many games as possible. There's no sense in sticking with Jameis. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Dorian Thompson-Robinson starting here sooner than later. So it will be Jameis for this game, but even coming off the bye, I don't know how you could go with this Browns team the rest of the year.
Yeah, a little DTR is interesting. Glenn, how say you?
I'm in agreement. It's the Saints. And I would add to it that the funny thing about Jameis beating the Ravens a couple weeks ago is it's completely dismissed. He did the Jameis thing. He threw the ball to the other team 4 times in the game, not plays that could have been made, like plays that you and I should make, Dave. Like the ball was thrown directly to not just Kyle Hamilton, Eddie Jackson. The ball was thrown directly to 4 Ravens defenders in that game, and they just said, nah, we're good. We'd rather not. That's the Jameis Winston story. Like that's what he does. So I just sort of assume that every time he plays, and most teams decide they would rather catch the ball when it's thrown to them, unlike the Ravens who just weren't in the mood that particular day.
All right. Now we're going to go snake order here. And by the way, I'm going to take the Saints as well in this one. But now let's snake order right back and go with Glenn here. The Bengals in LA to play the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. I suspect there will be a ton of public money on Cincy. The Chargers are a little under the radar because I think of Justin Herbert's injury that kind of just sort of hit the pause button on that team. But they're quietly a factor in this AFC. How say you in this one?
It's the irony is I just talked about how I like the Bengals, but this matchup actually screams Chargers to me because it's Greg Roman doing Greg Roman things, keeping the ball on the ground, them playing just enough defense. And I get it again. I think the Bengals are somewhat impervious to defense as well. That's how good Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are. But this screams to me, they get you to play the way that they want to play. They infuriate you. And Justin Herbert against the Bengals defense is a pretty good matchup that I would like a lot. I'm rotating all my fantasy leagues trying to find where Justin Herbert is still on a waiver wire this week because I want him starting for me against the Bengals defense. I actually think I like the Chargers a little bit in this game, which really hurts the fact that I picked the Bengals to be the 7th seed in the AFC.
Yeah, it really is a huge one for Cincy upcoming here. Ben, how say you?
I'm in the same boat, and I like the Chargers more because I like the Chargers than anything bad I have to say against the Bengals. I think this idea that like Justin Herbert's been an underwhelming quarterback, I think is totally fantasy pilled, just because he's not putting up 300 and 400 yard games on a regular basis. And I'd say the same thing about anybody who thinks Justin Jefferson is better than Jamar Chase. I just think we get in our head these fantasy stats that create these narratives, but I just think the Chargers are a really good team. I think they're They're a really well-coached team. I think they're quietly one of the bigger threats to the Chiefs in the AFC. So nothing against the Bengals. I just like the Chargers more.
Listen, you can say things against the Bengals if you want to. This is a safe space, right, Joe? What do you think happens in this game?
Yeah, of course, I want the Bengals to win this one, but I also really like what the Chargers are doing. And their defense is, in a lot of metrics, number one. They're number one in EPA per play. I feel like they defend the run really well, even with light boxes, and that's going to be hard on the Bengals. Bengals aren't a great running team anyways. They're doing a lot of what they're doing on offense without having a good run game. They're doing it without Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle, without T. Higgins as wide receiver number 2. Both guys could return this week, could give them a boost on offense. Maybe that tips the scales and how well the Chargers defense is playing and puts it back in the Bengals' favor on offense. But the defense for the Bengals needs to step up. They need to make a play. They can't. It's Trey Hendrickson or nothing right now. And it's been that way the whole season. Can they get some of these young guys? They've drafted so many. Miles Murphy, Joseph Osai, Chris Jenkins Jr., Cam Taylor-Britt, DJ Turner. Can one of these guys develop in the second half of the year and become a player they can depend on? It starts now. I don't feel confident in this game, especially going to LA. Not that they've got a home field advantage by any means at all, but I do think this is going to be a tough game for them. If they can pull it out, though, if this is Joe Burrow turning into Joe Burrow at the end of the season, if it's the Bengals with their backs against the wall, now's the time. Now's the time to show everyone you've had opportunities for statement games. You lost those close games against the Chiefs, Ravens. Do it now. Here it is. It's on the table, so it should be at least interesting to watch.
It is funny. The Bengals and Ravens have similar flaws and similar strengths. And then the two Ohio teams have their rivalry, the Paul Brown Bowl that they play. I don't know why Browns fans don't hate the Ravens. I mean, they're the ones who are you. They should be the Baltimore Purples. They took your team. They're the ones who have your Lombardis. Why Browns fans hate the Steelers, I'm not exactly sure. But all that said, the rivalry is Steelers and Ravens, not just in this division, but in all of pro football. I don't know, Joe and Ben, if you know about this, but one side of the rivalry, their team is named after the mid-century heroes who went into the steamy mills and forged the materials used to make the tanks and battleships and artillery used to defeat the Nazi scourge. That's one side. The other side is named after a poem written about a bird, written by a guy who was a cosmopolitan northeasterner, New York, Boston. Late in life, he moved to Baltimore, married his cousin, got drunk, and died in a gutter. That's the other side of this. So you can choose however you want, though. I'll start with you, though, Joe. How do you think Ravens at Steelers shakes out?
Yeah, can the Steelers get enough on offense? Can they do enough other than Russell Wilson, rainbow balls down the field where, hey, that works. They've added another receiver that can help them with that, Mike Williams. I mean, ultimately that won the game last week, and you saw the Pickens touchdown, which was amazing. That guy ratio for crazy catches to regular catches, he's through the roof, right? Is that enough? The Ravens struggle to get a pass rush. They struggle to cover on the back end, but still, just like we said about the division and how we expect the division to go, I expect Lamar to do something crazy and be Lamar. Who makes that play at the end? Is it TJ Watt? Is it Lamar or whoever else, Zay Flowers on the offense, to Zay Flowers or to Mark Andrews or whoever it may be? I would say the Ravens should be favored, and I expect them to pull it off, but I'm not shocked if TJ Watt makes that play at the end of the game, and that just is what it is. And the Steelers somehow pull magic out of wherever they're pulling it from. And even though I am a steel worker myself, I'm taking the Ravens.
Oh, yeah. Traitor, then, in other words. At last look, the Ravens were laying 3.5 in Pittsburgh. Disrespectful. Ben, how say you?
Yeah, I think I tipped my hand probably with this one when I picked the Ravens to win the division. I don't ever want to hear anything bad about Mike Tomlin again. Like, this is the most incredible coaching job I think he's done. I think the most impressive thing has been the conviction that he had in going from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson at that point in the season, when I think probably 90% of the coaches would have just let it ride with Justin Fields. But having said all that, I just like the Ravens roster better. I like them better top to bottom. I think they have the best player on the field, even when TJ Watt is out there. And so I'm going to go with the Ravens.
I want to give the floor to Glenn. Let me just say, here's what tricks your eye is watching a game like Ravens Bengals a week ago and then thinking, how would the Steelers hang with either one of those teams? They don't have anywhere close to the firepower. But of course, like you say, Ben, about Tomlin, he has some voodoo that has worked its stuff on Lamar. But in general, the worst team in the league, best team in the league can play the Steelers, and he can turn it into a knuckleball with his scheme. That said, it's going to be a 20-17 final. Why? Because it's always a 2017 final between these two. I'm going to let Glenn give us his pick in this one.
Yeah, we have to handle all the important stuff first. In Baltimore, a crab cake is a delicacy. In Pittsburgh, French fries on a sandwich is just French fries on an effing sandwich. It is not a culinary creation of any sort. Anyone could do that. Secondarily, Pittsburgh tried to steal Topanga away from us, and I've never gotten over that. They will never be forgiven for their actions. It's not okay. All that being said, Dave, one thing you're 1,000% right about is in this era, yes, it's going to be 20-17, unlike a past era where you knew it was going to be 13-10. In every game,
That's
that
right.
was the
That's
score.
exactly
You knew
right.
it was going to be 13-10 one way or the other. So yeah, I don't like 3.5 necessarily because I don't feel it. You will remind me that the Steelers have won 7 of the last 8 games they've played against the Baltimore Ravens, which seems incredibly strange because the Ravens have been the much better team over the last 4 years than the Pittsburgh Steelers. But it's a weird anomaly the way that it's worked, that they were playing like a Wednesday afternoon game with half of the Ravens roster having COVID a couple years ago and Trace McSorley having to be the quarterback for that game. The NFL insanely has scheduled these games for week 18 when the Ravens have already locked things up and had no reason to play their quarterback. So the bizarre sets of circumstances have prevented there from even being a Lamar Jackson chapter in this rivalry. A year ago, the Ravens went to Pittsburgh, which I call the house of derp, because to your point, that voodoo leads to teams that otherwise do things really well, just derping it the hell up for 60 minutes. And despite knowing that that stupid song is going to play, you know it's coming. They've done it every year. Still, somehow, there is something that happens in those moments. They have to prove. Lamar Jackson has to write his chapter in this rivalry. He is too good for me to believe that that is not coming. So yes, I do think the Ravens will handle that this week, and they will finally get that off of the shoulder. Whatever they're dealing with this weird anomaly of Lamar Jackson not having great success. He was the highest graded quarterback in the league last year when they went to Pittsburgh, and none of his receivers, including Mark Andrews, who's one of the best receivers in the NFL for the last 5 years, felt like catching the football that day. It's a house of derp. It has to change. It changes this Sunday.
It's funny you say that because I thought you said house of dirt. And that's what I always say. Tomlin drags every team into the mud. And then they end up dirty too, and they lose to teams that they shouldn't lose to, like the Colts and otherwise. But man, it is remarkable in the QB league. Video game scores a lot of the time all over the league, and somehow Pittsburgh can just boil every team down to this knuckleball fight. Okay. By the way, I'm not going to sit here with Glenn Clark staring at me and pick against the Steelers. I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. I respect you, Joe and Ben, but I'm a little irrational right now here. All right. So there you go with your week 11 picks. And by the way, I have a terrible towel here. If you want to set Hoosh, he played for the Bengals and the Ravens. And when he was on the Bengals, he shined his shoes with a terrible towel. I don't think the Bengals have won a game, or maybe won like 2 games since he did that 15 years ago. Maybe if you want one of the current birdies to do it, Glenn,
and then he dropped the ball in the playoffs against the Steelers when it came to the Ravens it went really well. That was just a dynamite. He actually did catch a game winner against the Steelers in Pittsburgh as a Raven, but then in a game that mattered against Ben Roethlisberger, he dropped what would have kept a drive going to go win the game. We're totally over it. We don't think about it at all. Everything's good here. A reminder that those stupid towels don't make any noise. When you guys are waving them around, they make no noise whatsoever.
Oh, well, you want to say it? Say it to his face. If you want to talk bad about the terrible towel, it's right here. You could say it.
Any noise.
I wouldn't do that before the game. I wouldn't do that. It has no history of success there. All right, that sets us up neatly then, fellas, for a little time capsule type of questions here. And I do think, by the way, the iconic image of the AFC North is Antonio Brown by an inch and a half, maybe extending the ball over the goal line to win the division. And I think that was 2016 with Eric Weddle pulling at his face mask. Interested in your thoughts on that. But Joe, I'm going to start with you here. And it's too easy to say who's the best quarterback, although, you might want to try to make a case for old Joe Burrow there. People have had the debate on the other side of the ball, though, for the last couple of years. In your opinion, who's the division's best defender right now?
Right now? Current.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say it is Myles Garrett. And even the years where TJ Watt was winning the Defensive Player of the Year, I was like, man, I watch tape and I feel like Garrett's better. I feel like he gets more attention. I feel like moving him all around is an advantage to the Cleveland defense. But at the same time, if Watt can only line up at the one spot and still dominate the way he does, it says something. And we have the same thing with Trey Hendrickson. He only plays one spot and you're still able to win. It's pretty crazy. But I am a tape and evaluation type of person. And to me, when I watch Garrett, I go, what a freak. You can't replicate that. You can't find that. You can't do that again. But I do acknowledge and understand that even with TJ Watt, use advanced data and say his pass rush win rate isn't that great. But okay, I'm watching him continue to make plays. So I don't, does the data really matter if he continues to have a magnet in his back pocket where the ball just has to bounce his way on a fumble? How does that happen? How does he scoop?
It is wild that you can be a clutch sack master. I've never seen such a thing.
How could you be and fumbles are just random, and yet he still is involved in so many of them. So I understand if someone says Watt, but to me, Garrett is the best player. Watt's probably the greatest.
Go watch some tape of Myles Garrett. See if you ever see him drop into pass coverage like TJ Watt does sometimes. Ben Axelrod, how say you?
Well, you wouldn't want Myles Garrett to drop into pass coverage, right? You want him to get after the quarterback. I have to have one homer pick on here. I've been trashing the Browns. I've been praising the Ravens and the Bengals and to a lesser degree the Steelers. But I'm going to go with the homer pick. I'm going to pick Myles Garrett. Look, if I was a Steelers fan, I'd probably say TJ Watt. Whatever the difference is, it's not close. I think that it is close, and I think that Garrett is more consistent, but I think Watt does make more splash plays. So it's kind of, pick what you want there, but I'll go with Myles Garrett.
I'm actually going with Beanie Bishop. How say you, Glenn Clark?
Look, these guys are probably right that Myles Garrett is the overall better football player, but the closer is the guy always for me, the guy that is winning football games and making the game-changing plays. And so, yeah, I'll default to TJ Watt because of it. The Ravens are missing a player like that since Terrell Suggs. They just haven't had one. They've barely had any decent pass rushers during that time period. It's such a game changer to have someone that you can count on when all the chips are on the table to go make a freaking play and win a game. And TJ Watt always seems to be that guy. So I'll default to TJ Watt because of it.
I love talking about uniforms, and so I must ask this one. Ben, uniforms best get-ups.
I'm gonna go Ravens, and it's yeah, you know what? It's kind of a degree of difficulty thing for me because I think the three other teams do have some historical significance behind their uniforms. I can't go with the Browns because I already made one homer pick, and that's like my quota when it comes to talking about the Browns. Bengals are too close to the Browns, so I can't go with them. Steelers, that would be like asking me my favorite college uniform and expecting me to go with Michigan. They're not even in the conversation for me. The Ravens, what they've been able to do, you asked why me as a Browns fan, why I don't have an issue with the Ravens. We've never had a rivalry with them. Like we've never played in any games with any historical significance. It's been the rivalry between a windshield wiper and a bug. And so I think that what they've been able to accomplish since 1996 and the players that they've put in that uniform, like it could not have worked out any worse for the Cleveland Browns, for them to move to Baltimore and all of a sudden become one of the most competent franchises in football, have players like Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Lamar Jackson now. I mean, to win 2 Super Bowls on top of all that, I just think that what they've accomplished in those uniforms has added some historical significance to it. And purple and black's not the easiest combination to make work, but I like the way
they give credit for that. You're right.
Yeah. I like the way they mix in the gold. I just think, look, I give them the points for degree of difficulty.
Thanks for everything, Browns legend Ozzie Newsome. Yeah, I thought the purple hats looked pretty good last Thursday. Glenn Clark, how say you?
I didn't love them only because the logo was so
small.
The
logo was terrible. That's right.
I didn't like that. I love the purple. The purple looked great. I think we all know it's the Steelers Bumblebee uniforms. So I think those are definitely the best.
I like those.
Oh, how could you like those?
Because they're
It's like when
cool
Nobody
the
likes
looking.
those.
No, it's like when the
I
Ravens
love
put on
them.
those mustard colored pants the year that Jimmy
Ugh,
Clausen was playing quarterback
those
as
were
Joe
bad.
Flacco got hurt, and yet they somehow beat the Steelers that year. Go figure. No, it's the when the Ravens wear the all black on a primetime game.
Oh,
Terrell Suggs has talked about it. Like there's just something. They all seem like they play better. It's the definition of that look good, feel good. There's something about that aesthetic of the Ravens, the stadium with the purple, and then the all black uniforms and the dominance of the defensive players that were wearing them in primetime games. I don't know how to explain it. It's the one time that the Ravens have aura, well, that and the presence of Lamar Jackson, the way that we talk about the aura of playing games in Pittsburgh.
fun fact. I once interviewed Terrell Suggs for a half an hour, and at the end of it, I said, "Hey, I have a gift for you." And I started to reach for it, and he said, "If it's a terrible towel, keep it the F away from me." And he was not kidding around.
He
Joe, how
doesn't
say
mess
you?
around.
I have to say, I disparaged the Bengals uniforms for many moons. The little tweaks they've made over the last few years have gotten them all the way right. They look good out there. How say you?
Yeah, and I think the division has great uniforms as a whole, from classic looks like the Browns and the Steelers to unique looks as well. And that's where I favor, and I haven't had too many homer picks here today, but I'm going to say the Bengals here. I like when helmets just don't slap a logo on there. I like the Eagles with the wings. I like the Vikings with the horn. I like the Bengals with the tiger stripes. And they were made fun of in 81 when they switched to it. And they're like, it's too bold. It's too crazy. Now they've had it for that many years, and it is classic. When you see it, it's the Bengals, and it's so good. You've even seen college teams and high school teams mimic it and wear it in their own colors. And I agree. I think the changes they've made recently, cleaned them up, made them look really classic but new at the same time. And they're alternates. When they went white tiger, and now you see all these teams with the white variations of their uniforms, the white tiger makes too much sense. It looks great right behind me. You see the helmet there.
It
But
does.
their numbers and their records when they're wearing their orange alternates and their white alternates are fantastic. And they can go all black if they need to, sans the orange helmet, but they just have so many options. And I think they look good in most of them.
Yeah, I was enjoying this conversation so much. And then all three of you, who I like to varying degrees, let me down. How could you go again? We can talk about whatever else you want, but helmet specific, that's the best helmet in pro football, probably in football, period. They only have the one logo. Hey, your helmet should have
the best helmet. You know that. Pat the Patriots the best helmet.
Hey, Steelers, what are you guys doing, man? Like you either have no logo or you have it on both sides, and the Steelers are like, nope. Yeah, but like when we do the crashing helmets on primetime games, if it's the left side of your helmet, it'd just be a black helmet and it won't look good. Like, okay, I love it. I love it. It's a middle finger to television networks and beyond. Okay, like I say, I've mostly enjoyed this conversation. Let's bring it on home here. And I'm going to start with you, Ben, on this one. And I'll give you a specific to help evoke what I'm getting at here. Is it okay to root for the division, as in the Kansas City Chiefs, dynastic and all of that, go in to Charm City for the AFC title game? Is it okay to root for the Ravens in that one? Where do you come down philosophically on division pride, or they're in our neighborhood, so I guess kind of cool if they win, or do you want to see them suffer a little bit more? Ben?
It's circumstantial for me. I cannot imagine a situation where I would be rooting for the Steelers. It would be tough for a situation for me to root for the Ravens, but I could at least envision it. The Bengals I have rooted for. Like I was rooting for them throughout that run when they made the Super Bowl. Like I said, I love Joe Burrow. I've always loved Jamar Chase dating back to college. I have so many family members and friends who are Bengals fans, and I generally root for their success. So yeah, I think it's circumstantial, but yeah, it's not something like the SEC or the Big Ten where I'm going to be chanting AFC North, but there's circumstances where I'll root for the other teams.
I go hardcore the opposite. I never root for my college football conference. I don't understand that. They've caused me more pain than somebody who plays on the West Coast or down in Florida. I want to see them suffer for making me have suffer at some point in the past. Glenn Clark, how say you?
It's ironic, right? I don't think it would ever be related to the division argument. Like I want to see the division do well. But if you told me, hey, the Ravens lose to the Bengals in the divisional round, it's Bengals Chiefs this year. For the sake of, I'm sick of it just being the Chiefs in the Super Bowl every year, I could see myself genuinely saying, Joe Burrow's a likable enough guy. Like, I would prefer for it to be the Bengals. And it wouldn't be like me, rah-rahing or something like that, but just have that feeling of, I'd rather they win. I'd like to see that happen. But it wouldn't be because they're in the division. I'll tell you the wild one for me on Sunday, Dave, was watching them play the Commanders, watching the Steelers play the Commanders. And I had this moment where I was like, I know I'm rooting against the Steelers. I know that I want the Commanders to win this game, but I also don't know that I want to face a pissed off
Hmm.
Steelers team next Sunday. So there was a small part of me that after Johnny Newton jumped off sides was like, yeah, maybe that was for the best. Like maybe that was the best case scenario here, is that it worked out that way. So that was a bit of a conflict or a conflicting feeling. But yeah, never based on it being the division. I don't have that feeling at all.
Man, I love that. And your comment about Joe Burrow, I don't know what it is about that cat that has allowed him in my brain to, I don't resent him as much. I
Nope.
know Lamar Jackson is very popular. Maybe the Ravens have hurt my feelings more over the years than the Bengals have, but I don't despise Joe Burrow nearly as much as I should. Joe, how say you on this one?
It's tough when you bring up the Chiefs because the Bengals have like a out of division rivalry with them. They played them so many times. It's split 3-3 in the Burrow era. And so if it's Chiefs Ravens, I don't know which way that would go. I would just hate myself for that weekend, I think, and see how I feel while the game's going on. But if it's the Steelers Chiefs, I can't root for the Steelers. I think the Steelers have done too much damage, especially postseason. Bengals Steelers has been ugly, especially the last two times, 2005, 2015. Both 2015, what an epic meltdown and the national stage where both teams embarrassed themselves at the end, and Steelers limp into next week because that's just how those games were going at the time. And 2005, you brought up TJ Houshmandzadeh with the towel. And I just cannot think of Carson Palmer getting hurt within 2 plays of that game and thinking, how much we just despise the Pittsburgh Steelers. If it was the Browns, though, because they haven't won, because that fan base, and I know the analysts and the writers and the people that love the team and follow the team, they deserve something. I think I could lean towards the Browns in that situation, but yeah, it would be tough.
A few empaths. I didn't realize that's what we have here. That's what ultimately a little rust around it, but deep down, big hearts. That's what all four of us have here.